I don't know what I'm doing anymore. I'm just trying to get views on YouTube, man. This fucking sucks. I just want to talk about cool things all day, but here I am reacting to people on the internet showing their bodies as bodybuilders do and trying to give you guys some insight and education through that mechanism as opposed to just sitting down in front of a camera talking about my own problem.
I am dead inside.
You guys have probably seen Dr. Mike talking about, or other people most likely, talking about his horrible placing, and I'm not trying to be rude, Mike, I'm sorry about saying this, but your not so great placing in the most recent show that he did, which I believe was the 2024 NPC Universe was the show, and Mike was the guy. And that's who we're going to talk about right now. And he didn't do so good. No! In fact, he placed at 7th, which isn't so great. Weird thing is, he puts a comment on Who's the Best Bodybuilder page, which if you aren't following them on Instagram and you're a bodybuilder enthusiast, I recommend you do. They post a lot of good bodybuilding news, but he actually posts, honestly, not lean enough, not tan enough, and could use bigger arms and possibly too sexy. Let me know, guys. Great humor, Dr. Mike. But real talk, I think he has a lot of good points there, but there's a lot of also sudden statements from him that made me kind of scratch my head and say, what is going on here? If you don't know who Dr. Mike is, let me fill you in on a little bit of the details. First of all, Dr. Mike has been around the world of fitness and mostly bodybuilding for, about over a decade. He's been here for a long time. But recently, in like the past 4 months, their YouTube channel, Renaissance Periodization, has gone from 1 million subscribers to 2.2 million subscribers in a seemingly lightning fast pace that, to be fair, no other fitness channel has accomplished, which is amazing. But Mike himself is the guy heading this spear. He talks a lot about how to get extremely jacked, huge, and ultimately build an amazing physique using principles that he's sort of developed with his team, of course. He has an app, and it's pretty good. I tried it for a brief moment in time. Not really my thing, but a lot of people do like it. He has several books, and he's coached several athletes that look pretty good. Mostly natural, science-based lifters, to be honest. I think that's a lot more than many of us have done, which is awesome. And I think he's highly accomplished in this space. Every day, Mike is posting content, usually, and it's going to be about something related to building muscle or fitness. He places himself as an authority figure, which is great, and I think most people should if they're talking in the industry that they're working in. I mean, this is quite literally what I'm doing in this video right now, so I get it. But Mike really wanted to apply himself in bodybuilding, and I'm gonna take this film out. And he did that, and he's done pretty good. He's had a lot of shows, well, I shouldn't say a lot, but a good amount of shows where he's competed and done okay. We have one show here, the NPC Diamond Classic, which honestly, pretty lacking in this one right here. And this was, post 10 years of posting content in relevance to science-based lifting and kind of having the frameworks that people need to build muscle. And look, I'm not gonna lie, there's a lot of need for improvement here, and if you pulled up my NPC pictures, it's not a great look either. I'm notoriously over dieted and shredded, extremely shredded, but I get in my own head just like anybody does, and unfortunately end up with results probably like Dr. Mike himself. In this show, in fact, that's exactly what he said, is that he over dieted. I don't necessarily agree with that statement just based off the pictures, but here we are. And so we fast forward a little bit to the most recent show, NPC Universe, that Dr. Mike did. And I'll be honest, compared to that last show in 2020, this is a light years difference of a physique. I mean, the dude is fucking yoked. He has pretty decent shape, and I'll be honest, man, like, goals, bro? Like, goals, straight up. Like, if I could have legs like that, I would take them off of his body and literally sew them onto mine and steal them for the rest of my life as he hobbled around as a legless freak.
Oh, cool.
But still, not so great, because when we start to turn him around in these quarter turns, you see a hell of a lot greater of a story. I just want to ask you, the audience, a question, and I don't want to be the decisive answer here. I'd rather you say it yourselves. Do you think that Mike Israetel is conditioned in this photo? Do you think that over dieting caused the issues in this photo, or that a mistimed peak maybe caused the issues in this photo? Or do you think this is as lean as you need to be for a potential pro card? Now, look, it's rich of me to put any hate on anybody, and I'm certainly not. I think Mike's done a hell of a lot of good for this industry, but there is some discrepancies within this physique and who he displays himself to be online, which again is the authority, like the authority on exercise science, diet manipulation, and things of the super sort of supplement pharmacology routes. If you don't know what that means, it's basically steroids. Honestly, guys, help me. I'm trapped in Canada right now. I think I'm going crazy. I need a way out of here as soon as humanly possible. Please, thank you. Well, because of this misfortune and not placing super well, he took to podcasts, Instagram posts, many of which were not around when I came to look. In fact, they've been deleted, so I couldn't really reveal a lot of what was said in those Instagram posts, but I could kind of tell you a little bit about what they said, as well as, a couple YouTube videos where he briefly mentioned some things that happened at the show. And of course, in these posts and stuff, he elaborated on why he didn't play so well, why he thought he didn't play so well. In certainty, he was in a very volatile state of emotions. Most people are post-show. I mean, if you think about it, you've dieted down to an obscene level of body fat. You're in an exotic position of literally the lowest calories a human of that size should be consuming, and doing an exorbitant amount of work, and even training jiu-jitsu, which Mike was still doing at this point. And you're going to be crabby. You're going to be emotionally driven because you've given something a ton of work. I mean, literally, you've applied yourself to such a degree that, like, life itself doesn't make sense outside of what you're doing in that moment. Bodybuilding is wildly insane. Like, it's honestly an insane sport, what you have to do. And so when you don't get the position that you want, you're so emotionally driven. I've been there. Like, I have been in that spot before where I should have been, in my mind at the moment, first place, right? I think that's what everyone says, right? There's a great saying that if you're not in, the only person that's satisfied with their placing is the guy that placed in first. When you're in second or third, it hurts even worse, and so on and so forth, right? It sucks because you literally put months of endless work into that single show, and you get a placing that is less than adequate. But that emotional volatility can be detrimental to relationships, to friends, to literally business, and in this instance, to social media exploits. And because of these posts, people really went in on Mike. And essentially what these posts had outlined was that he was lean. He was lean enough. And in fact, it was just the tan that didn't show his literal shreds. I think he has something going because the tan is obviously thoroughly too light. There's a lot more than just a tan going on here. Tan doesn't just suddenly create lower back fat or glute rolls. That is quite literally just a lack of conditioning in our world of bodybuilding. And look, this isn't just coming from a place of non-experience. I'm not just a guy sitting here talking about this shit in the room of some house in Calgary, Canada, help me God. I'm jacked. I've been jacked. I'm not really jacked anymore, to be honest, but I've been jacked. I've been 260 pounds. Personally, myself, I'm kind of done with the whole bodybuilding thing. I like fighting more, honestly. Like, Muay Thai is way more interesting to me. Eating a bunch of food that's good and healthy, but still staying really lean and attractive is really ideal to me, and making money and not spending it all in drugs is also really ideal to me. But I've been huge before. Like, I've been 260 pounds. It's a great feeling sometimes, but it kind of really fucking sucks when you're not in the gym. If you're not following me on Instagram, what the fuck, man? Go follow me on Instagram, because usually most of my Instagram followers come here. But if you're not, do it the other way around, please. But this is my conditioning. One day out from the show, I was sitting at right about 206. This is 3 weeks post-show. I'm sorry. This is 3 weeks post-show. I was sitting at 220. Glutes striated, still really fucking lean. I totally understand what it takes to get lean. I totally understand what it takes to do this sport. I'm no, noob to this stuff, basically. I've competed more than most people. I have my PMBA Pro card. Like, I've done it, right? And I hope people understand this is really relevant here, because I'm trying to say this from the nicest place possible and not be rude to Mike. I'm just kind of analyzing the situation. Back to the main sauce. Mike had a podcast, and it was really focused around the show and what he felt after the show, what his thoughts were during the show, after the show, and all of this stuff. And I will show you what it is here, but if you want to find it, it's on Spotify. It's not on YouTube or anything like that, which is kind of interesting, but it's not on anywhere published. That it's kind of just ostracized on Spotify, so it's a little bit hard to find. But what he was saying, for the most part, is a brief summary, a TLDR here, is that he was on a lot of bad, not so good drugs in high doses of them. Thursday was the hardest day he's ever had in his life. He was very crabby, upset, mad at people in general, wasn't doing so great. And to be honest, the whole beginning of the podcast is just a lot of complaining about the situations and environments that bodybuilders are put in without accommodations, and how his situation was the absolute worst without zero accommodations and having to stand for 40 plus minutes backstage while he was waiting to get on stage, which honestly sounds like a you problem and not necessarily the stage runner's problem. He was also talking about how he was a bad client to Jared Feather, who was just recently on our live podcast. I recommend you check that out. We're on every Thursday, 8 p.m. CST. He was a bad client because he was double guessing what Jared had to say. In fact, he was starting to implement his own things, which Jared himself talked about, but he also said here. And let me pause right here. This is so fucking common within anything that any bodybuilder does in the off season or before a show, but more specifically before a show. I mean, guys go absolutely nuts trying to figure out what they need to do to optimize, and if they're not optimized enough, and if their coach hasn't provided them the optimal program, at least in their mind, they're going to enact that optimal program, and it's going to fuck things up every single time. This is a horrible call. I mean, I do it myself. It's very neurotic towards the end of a prep, and you really fuck shit up. Like, you'll do weird stuff, like take more drugs, like eat less food, like do more cardio, like eat a burger because you think that somehow that's going to get you leaner. It's a really weird situation. And unless you've been that lean before and pushed to get that lean before, you wouldn't really understand it. A lot of veteran bodybuilders, and kind of myself at this point, have sort of confirmed that that is a needless voice in the equation, and just to ignore it. But it still happens so often, especially with newer bodybuilders. He did his own thing, sort of closer to that show window, and double guessed Jared, didn't necessarily follow his orders, and he didn't make the first call out. And at this point in the podcast, he said that there is no point in completing the show, which I think is crazy, because, like, just as a principle alone, if you're going to do something, stand on your own 2 feet and do it. Even if you're failing, failing means first attempt at in learning. Learn that from the military, folks. Army, green weenie, let's go. And he literally was like, fuck it, like, there's no point in doing this. So lost motivation, lost the will to try, and ended up in this position. And again, he talks about sort of the tan here. In fact, what he also talks about is Jared told him to go get additional coats of the tan, to do hygiene, to shave, and all of this before the show. And what did Mike do? Well, absolutely zero of any of that. He didn't do shit. In fact, he was like, I can't keep asking people to shave my back. It's too selfish. I didn't want to get a tan. And listen, I've been there. Bodybuilding is hella selfish. Part of the reason that I don't do it consistently anymore. I'm more to just do it for a hobby at this point, honestly. And it sucks. But if you're going to a show, like, you're going to be presenting yourself if you win or lose, and you might want to present yourself, especially if this is your main source of income, pretty well. And this thing divulged into talking about, bodybuilding incels, and fans of bodybuilding are incels at large, and they all comment because people are just angry at themselves and discontent with their own bodies. And he was just not tanned appropriately, but he was lean enough, and no one would know that because they weren't there at the show, and they also don't know what bodybuilding is, and just kind of insulting the people that literally pay for his lights to be on. So that wasn't great, and honestly, a PR disaster in my books as a business model, I guess, but maybe not his. And the one thing I'll say about this, online comments can be devastating. I get them all of the time, more so on TikTok and Instagram, less on YouTube. A lot of you guys are super supportive, which I genuinely appreciate. And you guys, sometimes, to be very real with you, keep me alive on a day-to-day basis. But that's a story for a different video. I get it can be tough. But there's also something I learned a long time ago, also in the military, is that there's a little bit of truth in what everybody says. If somebody says you're fat, well, you might just be a little fat. And that's the reality of it. If someone's being very vocal about their opinions on some societal thing, well, there might be some truth behind that, even though they're being maybe a little too vocal and discussing things in an inappropriate manner. You always have to ask, well, let me just not disregard everything this person's saying. Let's evaluate it from an objective standpoint and realize if there is any truth to this statement. And if there is, how can I correct what I've done if I need to correct what I've done? But ultimately, this conversation ended that he's now going to quit bodybuilding, focus on just having a bigger physique, but not really trying to sustain his leg mass or anything else, and also be able to reduce the drugs for quite some time and focus on jiu-jitsu, which, again, you just heard me say it here. I have no quarrel with this. In fact, this is kind of what I'm doing. I'm taking a little bit of gear. I'm training as a bodybuilder. I'm eating extremely low calories for me. And I'm trying to do fighting as much as I can. I mean, this is like, that's kind of how I want to pursue life at the moment and focus on business more than, bodybuilding and prepping and all of these other things. So honestly, I get it. Like, I get where he's coming from. But let me be very clear. The point in this video is that I'm trying to allude to people who really do claim to know a lot of things on the internet, honestly, can't implement them themselves most often. And if they do, sometimes that implementation isn't as they had planned it out on paper. Because you can make the best videos, you can organize them in the most unique and creative ways, you can be funny, you can be really, really cordial with your audience, but at the end of the day, things like bodybuilding aren't just based on, what you can put on paper or what you can put into a framework. Sometimes things change so drastically just from person to person, and then from person to person, each and every year that they're doing it, it changes. And it can't just be this framework and protocol and this conception of consistency is great, yes, but like, the consistency is within this program. It has to be this program. And this is the only program that works in the world. It can have to be something that morphs, that is adaptable and malleable to changing environments for a human being. And I don't think the peaking issue was anything relevant to the tan. Yes, the tan was shit. It was garbage. Your own fault. But let's be honest. Conditioning wasn't there. Shoulders aren't looking hot. Like they're pretty lacking, brother. And to be completely fair, again, conditioning, especially on that back end, wasn't so great. One thing Justin Harris has taught me a lot is that, quite frankly, if you are looking at a prep in a term of let's just say I'm prepping you, and I'm looking at your body part, which gets the leanest the quickest. For me, it's my midsection. I can be fat as fuck and still have a six-pack. Okay, great. If I go into my prep and I only look at my midsection as a measure of success, I'm going to fail because I'm not looking at the weakest part of your physique or my physique, right? So let's say I'm taking my physique into example. My glutes and lower back / hamstrings are really the sort of last things to come in, more specifically my lower back. So what I need to do is measure each and every single week of that prep based on my worst body part. I feel like not a lot of people do this, and it's pretty common sense. You don't just want to have conditioned legs, you want to have a conditioned physique. You don't want to just have a great chest and shoulder striation, you want to have a whole body striation. That would be fucking disgusting. But if you do it, it'd be, I don't know if it'd win you shows, actually. I think it would just be fucking weird. You can do it, though. Like, you can get lean all around your body. You just have to focus on your weakest link. And in this case, I feel like Mike maybe wasn't, and he was getting a lot of positive feedback from the people around him, especially his wife. And they kind of fed into his mind that, hey, you're lean enough, you're going to do great. Just get on stage and rock the shit, man. Didn't happen. And for you, who's planning on prepping, hopefully, if you're watching this channel, maybe you can learn from this and understand that, hey, it's not so easy. It is very easy to get into your head. And yes, even the best of us need coaches. This sport goes far, far beyond what any human can tolerate cognitively just by themselves. And I've been through some wicked shit in the military, but in the military, you always have someone with you. Always, always, always have someone with you. When you're alone, where shit gets really twisted and you can get into really fucked up dark places. But if you're with someone and you have guidance that is accurate, you can get a lot done. This is my 2 cents. I don't know. What do you guys think about Mike? I mean, is he legit? Is all the information that he publishes online pretty good? Is it inaccurate? Is it false? Is it even valuable for the viewer? Or is this just a mishap entirely and he's he just didn't hit the peak and whatever, I don't know. What do you guys think? I don't know. Fuck it. I don't know. This fucking redhead out, dude. Out. Pieces.